Hi everybody, Eve Harow, Director of Tourism and Community Development for One Israel Fund, standing on a beautiful summer morning in a vineyard in the Shiloh Bloc. Nothing could be more natural than growing grapes in the greater area of Shiloh, where grapes have been grown for thousands of years. And I'm honored to be here with Dr. Shivi Drori at his winery, the Gva'ot Winery. He's a world-renowned researcher in grapes and wine. So tell us about where we are and why you're here in this particular place.
Good morning. We are here at the vineyards in Givat Harel, the vineyards of Gva'ot Winery. Givat Harel was established 22 years ago following the murder of Harel bin Nun by Palestinian terrorists in Yitzhar. His brother and our family decided to give a classic Zionist response and establish Givat Harel as an agriculture community here on the hills where our ancestors were working and living for many, many thousands of years. We started by planting vineyards and olive orchards, which produce olive oil and wine here, and we are now doing that for the last 20 years.
So usually at this time of year I have what's probably my favorite tour, which is a wine tour here in this area. And very often we come here to the Gva'ot Winery and bring people here to taste the wines and inevitably buy the wines. But the wines have changed over the years, all right? So we have the classic, the Merlots, and then as the years have gone by, bringing up some wines that no one's ever tasted before anywhere else.
Indeed. What we can see here are Cabernet Sauvignon grapes, which make beautiful wines, of course. These were actually introduced here just 150 years ago. In ancient times, our ancestors did not know Cabernet Sauvignon, did not know Merlot, of course. They produced wines from local varieties. These local varieties were lost for many, many years because of the Muslim prohibition of wine consumption. And in my research, starting around 10 years ago now, we developed, and actually we went out into the wilds, we collected and characterized these ancient varieties, we refound them, and now they're established again. Some of them are already back into the wine industry in Israel, and all of them are actually planted in our collection vineyard in Ariel. Some of them actually grow around here, here and there, feral on the ground, and still produce beautiful grapes. We can actually later go into the winery and taste the Jandali, the bittuni, some wines that here in Gva'ot Winery we are now reproducing wines out of these very ancient grape varieties. Look, Eve, here we have a feral grapevine growing on the ground like it was growing thousands of years ago. And this is actually the first vine I found which triggered the whole idea of looking for feral grapevines and grape varieties all over the country. Today we have more than 600 grapevines in hand. This was the first one to trigger the whole idea. And this is a Hamdani grape variety. We know that after genetic analysis, you can see they have big bunches, beautiful berries, and in about 4 weeks, they can make beautiful wines.
So this is clearly going to make a white wine. White doesn't seem to have the reputation of the red wines. The real connoisseurs, only red. Is that something that you think is fair?
Actually, it's not fair at all, mostly in such a hot climate as Israel. From our research, we found that most grape varieties growing around here are actually white, which raises the question, did they actually drink a lot of red wine? To me, it seems that they probably drank some more whites than reds. Let me show you something very interesting. Well, this is not just a hole in the ground. This is a very, very ancient wine press, dated to 3,500 years ago. This is a very primitive structure, a round structure with a rock surface leading the juice into the hole where it was collected by clay jars and rushed into a very deep cave to be fermented to beautiful wines. These grapes were probably used here because this is a white wine press.
So we're here at the mini lab of course, Shivi, the wine researcher. How many of there are you in Israel, wine researchers?
Only 2 for now, doing a lot of work. there are many enologists, but wine researchers, there are only two, unfortunately. But we're working on it. I'm actually teaching today in the University of Ariel, dozens of students every year. Hopefully, in a few years, we'll have much wider research into wine in Israel. I'll show you now how we can actually test how much sugar we have in our grapes to be picked in a few weeks. So this is gonna be our rosé from Cabernet Franc grapes. And let's see how far are we from harvest time. This is a hydrometer, and it can test the amount of alcohol, potential alcohol in the wine. In rosé, we're looking for around 12% alcohol. Here we are now around 11, so we're not far away from harvest. You see it's not pink at all. It will become pink by connecting with the skins for a few hours. It will become a very beautiful pink wine. This year we're gonna have here more than 100 tons processed in the winery. So let's go from the very ancient history of wine back into modern wine times. This is a wine made from very, very ancient wine grapes, the Petuni. This is the first red wine produced from these lost varieties that were refound by our research, and we will be tasting it shortly.
We just passed all this modern equipment. In the ancient day, they didn't have that. They didn't have electricity. So do you think that the wines that they drank then were as good as the wines that we have now?
Well, good is a relative term. They had probably very good wines because they were exported all over the world. People would not take the bother to actually send wine so far if it wouldn't sell. These wines, these varieties make very sophisticated and interesting wines. They actually didn't have all the cooling systems and so on, but they probably made wines with much higher alcohol and sugar level by partially drying the grapes. So they got some kind of port wine, as we call it today, and that could be preserved for many, many years, and it probably made a very sweet and high caloric beverages that we don't much like today, but they probably really, really liked.
And the big question, we're about 30 kilometers from Jerusalem and from where the temple stood. Did wines from here go 2,000 years ago to the temple?
That's an interesting question. The Mishnah says, Krutim vehatulim al falayayin. That means that there were two places, Krutim and Tulim, which we don't actually know where these places are. But the name Krutim resembles the name Krayot, which is very close by. So it makes sense that this area made beautiful wines, very good wines that actually were sacrificed on the altar and the temple.
We may now be drinking a wine that our ancestors drank here in the lands?
For sure. This variety is dated for more than 2,000 years. So this variety is indigenous to this specific area. And this is one of the best reds. It actually makes a very floral and fruity wine like Pinot Noir. And this, we call it the Israeli Pinot Noir. L'chaim.
So what's the next stage in Israeli wines? Because if you're now bringing out wines that are indigenous to the land of Israel, is this going to be the new phase? There's kosher wines from around the world, obviously many kosher wines here in Israel, but this is something that nobody else has, which is land of Israel grapes that grow nowhere else.
I believe that the future of the Israeli wine industry is not Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Chardonnay, which you can taste all over the world. You hear the story, the connection to the Bible, the connection to our ancestors' history and the traditions. These varieties make the story. They make the connection. They make the link. And by producing wines from these ancient varieties, I believe that a lot of people will come into Israel for the story, for the tour, for tasting the wines in their place of origin. That will make a whole new story of the Israeli wine making industry, and I'm sure that it will enhance, and a lot of people will come here in the years to follow.
Indigenous people growing their indigenous produce.
Exactly.
Doesn't get any better than that.
L'chaim again.
L'chaim again. I'm standing with Sarit Meir, the community coordinator. How many people do you have living here?
בגבעת הראל היום גרות 80 משפחות, 300 ילדים ברוך השם, והיישוב בצמיחה וגדילה. זה המרכז הקהילתי שלנו, הרוחני שלנו בגבעת הראל, הבית כנסת שלנו, שכאן הוא אבן שואבת לכל מה שמתרחש בקהילה. וכבר המקום צר מלהכיל את כל השפע ואת כל הצחוק של הילדים שלנו. ואנחנו רוצים לגדול ולצמוח כדי שיהיה לנו מקום ראוי. את מה שאתם רואים פה, בנו התושבים במאמצים ובכוחות פנימיים. היום אנחנו רוצים להעמיק את האחיזה שלנו בקרקע, להעמיק את האחיזה שלנו בעמק שילה, לפרוח ולצמוח ולגדול. בואו, תהיו איתנו בהרחבת בית הכנסת. אני מזמינה את כל מי שרוצה להיות שותף איתנו בחזון המופלא הזה בארץ ישראל.
We spoke to Shivi Drori about the temple and what kind of wine was used during the temple period 2,000 years ago, and if the first temple period 2,700 years ago. But Shiloh was the center, the religious center for the Israelites before that, before there's a temple in Jerusalem, while Jerusalem is still being held by the Jebusites. And we know from Shivi that the wines grow beautifully here. There's vineyards behind me. There's vineyards all through this valley. I, at this time of year, normally run wine tours, and it's something that's called Hatzarot Shel Ashirim, like the problems of the rich, because I never even know which wineries to go to. The blossoming and the rejuvenation of the wineries in this area only happened about 25 years ago, when people came here, understood that we were dealing right with our past. There are hundreds and hundreds of ancient wine presses that have been found in this area. So the end of the book of the Judges is really a tragic ending. Chapters 19, 20, and 21 talk about the near decimation of the tribe of Benjamin by the other tribes. And when there's just a few men left, the women and children have been killed. Everyone reels back in horror as to what's happened and realizes that they have to try and reconstitute the tribe of Benjamin. So this area is where Joshua divides the tribes and divides the tribal allotments. It's also the place where people are brought back. And reading to you from the end of the book of Judges, they instructed the Benjaminites as follows: go lie and wait in the vineyards, and as soon as you see the girls of Shiloh coming out to join in the dances, come out from the vineyards, let each of you seize a wife from among the girls of Shiloh and be off for the land of Benjamin. Even though up until that time you only married within your tribe, the law changes here, and the other tribes could give their daughters to the men of Benjamin. And here it's where the girls were caught in the vineyards. And what we have today in the modern times is a beautiful festival here on Tu B'Av, where women come here and dance in the vineyards. Not necessarily to be caught by a husband, but learn Torah and dance in the vineyards and reconnect ourselves to what went on here over 3,000 years ago when we first come into the land. Now, they had forgotten where Shiloh was. I'm reading to you here from the very end again of the book of Judges. The annual feast of the Lord is now being held at Shiloh. It lies north of Bethel, east of the highway that runs through Bethel to Shechem, and south of Livonah. If you have to give directions to a place, it means people forgot how to get there. And that's what happened here. So the place had lost its significance because people stopped coming, and Shiloh went off the map for many, many years. Except that now we're back, and there are many wineries here that are producing unbelievable wines, like Gva'ot Winery and others. There are people coming here all the time to visit, archaeologists digging, to uncover the past, to uncover who was here in the interim, because many, many different people came through here, also in the Second Temple period, Maccabees, but then you had Romans, and you had the Byzantine period because of significance that this area has for Christians. We have found the remains of many churches, all the way now through modern times. It's in the heart of the Shomron, and it's in our hearts. Shiloh, we've come back, and we are staying.